Peace, friends. I'm Pastor Tom Arthur from Sycamore Creek Church in Lansing, Michigan. Whether you experience sheltering in place as positive or negative, we can all shelter in God's grace daily. Psalm 91 says, "Those who live in the shelter of the Most High will find rest in the shadow of the Almighty." Our Daily Shelter is a live video podcast where we interview an expert in one area or topic related to COVID-19 and sheltering in place, so that we can find God's grace for today. We cover a range of topics from science to government and theology to prayer. We're looking to find God's grace in each area of our lives. So let's shelter in God's grace together right now. Poetry can be a powerful form of both self-exploration and self-expression. And we're living in a time that is ripe for both. While the pandemic has caused a lot of trial and suffering, it has also unleashed an immense amount of creativity while we've all been stuck at home. Today, I'm thankful to have on Our Daily Shelter Isabella Mansfield. Isabella is an award-winning local poet and regular member of the Poetry Room in REO Town. She shared her poetry with us in our face-to-face worship and our Zoom worship as well. And we are so grateful to have you with us today, Isabella. Thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me, Tom. It's good to see you, however virtually we get to be.
Yeah, last time I think we saw each other was on the Good Friday poetry service that we did that you and the Poetry Room participated in.
Yes, that was a fun one.
That was quite a hoot. If you can say a Good Friday poetry service was a hoot.
Well, it was not without its, technical hang-ups, but all of these Zoom meetings are a exercise in futility at the very least. But
I feel Isabella, this is our 40th and last episode of Our Daily Shelter. We're giving the poet the last word. And then I think we're shutting this down, and we're going to take a couple months off, and we're going to rethink what we're doing in the fall. But we've gotten better at this. I think. Have we gotten better, Jeremy? I mean, I think like we kind of.
No doubt, yeah.
Which is to say, Jeremy's gotten better because he's the producer. That's
everybody does a wonderful job.
We do it together. But hey, before we get to the topic of poetry today, what's your life been like during shelter in place? Since Good Friday was so long ago. It seems like
Good Friday feels like it was forever ago.
Yeah.
Shelter in place for me has been up and down a lot. I have a 9-year-old son, and so his schooling has, of course, all been through Zoom and Google Classroom. And yeah. I have learned that it was probably a really good thing that I did not continue on the path of becoming an elementary school teacher. I thought about it, and I took one class, and I'm like, I'm not feeling it. And wow.
Did you have the realization like we did that teachers need to be paid a lot more than we're paying them?
Yes, absolutely. I mean, we asked them basically, we collectively, just like, hey, you've planned your entire curriculum all summer long for the entire year. Why didn't you change it in a week and a half? You can do that, right?
Yeah.
So it's been a lot of schooling, and that's not been without some yelling.
Is he done?
Yes, actually, today they had their little, it was like a little car parade. We had to drive to school, and they had a little wave out. So It was really cute.
What
so today was his, he is at Cheryl Stockwell Academy.
Okay.
In Heartland.
All right.
Yeah. So there's been a lot of schooling and cooking and that's pretty much
it. That's it.
It's school. Been a lot of stuff.
It's teaching your kid and feeding your kid.
It's pretty much, it's all the things where you think that you're going to have the time on. I'll finally get a chance to really deep clean that one part of my house. It's not ever been time that's the problem. I think it's just the drive.
Speaking of feeding your kid and yourself, has your grocery bill been really high? Ours has been, we're like, what are we doing? Are we eating way more than we were?
well, you're eating at home the whole time. You're not like grabbing a quick bite or a snack somewhere. Everything comes from your house. And the price of groceries has all gone up too, because supply and demand is fun.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I found that it's saved us a fair amount of money too, because we were forced to eat at home. So we might as well
not eating
every single bit. We did a lot more dishes. That was the realization. I was like, why are we running our dishwasher 4 times a day? There's 3 people in this house.
Yeah. Yeah, you may remember my poem, or maybe you don't, that was about my wife having breast cancer.
Yes.
And the experience was cooking, cleaning, and clothes. And that's my experience of taking care of your wife when she has breast cancer, is you do lots of cooking, cleaning, and clothes.
Mm-hmm. I do remember that.
So have there been any moments of grace in the midst of it?
Yes. I think one of the best things that's come out of this, if I'm being very candid, is that my husband and I actually had kind of a bumpy couple of years. And things had been getting better progressively anyway, but being in lockdown and being stuck at home together 100% of the time kind of gave us an opportunity to refocus a little bit. And, well, we've got nothing else to do, so let's play a board game, just the 2 of us, or let's, we'll watch a movie during the middle of the day when he was still not back at work. And it kind of gave us a chance to sort of rediscover the stuff we used to do before we got married, when we were just broke in our 20s and didn't have anything to do. And so for my husband and I think it's actually been a good thing.
Are you familiar with Esther Perel?
Yes.
And do you know she does that Where Should We Begin podcast, where it's like you get to listen in on an hour-long therapy session with a couple? Mm-hmm. So she did one about the pandemic as well, or like several. Okay. And she was saying that basically this, like, couples who were in crisis before, it really, like, it was very stark. They either like got way better because they're all together, or got way worse. Like, right. There's no in between.
Yeah, I can see it going either way.
Yeah. Well, I'm really glad and grateful to hear that it was a positive experience for you. But Sarah and I have experienced the same thing. I mean, we're not without our own struggles, but the being together all day long, you better work on it.
Mm-hmm. It's been good. I think overall it's been a good thing for us. So I'm glad for that.
That's great. I think you have a poem here you wanted to share, didn't you? Something about self-care?
I do. I can't remember directly when I wrote this. I think it was fairly early on. So when it briefly refers to the middle of a pandemic, it's probably March, when we all kind of thought middle of the pandemic was about 2 weeks long. This is just a micro poem. It's actually called no, it's not a tanka. Is it? I think this was a tanka, which is a Japanese poetry style similar to a haiku. It has 2 extra lines. So it's 5 syllables, 7, then 5, and then 7, 7. So it's a little bit longer than a haiku. And this one, of course, is not necessarily just nature related. This was a tanka called Self-Care. Is buying myself tulips in the middle of a global crisis. Lean, red cups that open slow, reminding that spring will come. And that was it. Thank you.
That was short enough that I just want to rewind on the whole thing. Can we hear that again?
Sure.
Okay.
Self-care is buying myself tulips in the middle of a global crisis. Lean, red cups that open slow, reminding that spring will come.
Yeah.
I bought myself tulips.
Yeah.
They were, I think they were probably on clearance at Kroger, to be honest. But I bought myself tulips. They are my favorite flower. And they're one of the first flowers that bloom in the spring.
Yeah.
And here, right in the beginning of March, we are all locked down, and we're still dealing with winter weather. And I just needed a reminder that, you know what, better is coming.
I think that was part of maybe even the hardest part of the whole thing was the crappy weather in Michigan, like very early spring, late winter. It all like if it had been deep winter, we would have been ready to be like, we just would have been ready to be inside. That's
Right.
the rhythm of our lives. But
right. I can stay locked down when it's 10. I don't want to go anywhere. And now, but then it was, the weather was getting nicer and it was harder to stay in.
Yeah, but then it was the weirdest spring. Like it took forever and it was rainy, and then it snowed in May. And then, you know, you look to those flowers for grace because they're still popping up.
The tulips that I planted last fall, I've never planted. I don't have much of a green thumb. Usually I will buy them cut and wait for them to die. Sorry, my son's popping in for a second. I planted tulip bulbs in my front yard, and when they finally opened up, they were bigger than my hand. And
wow.
I'd never seen tulips open that big before. It was unbelievable. Sorry for the needed a piece of paper.
That's life right now, right?
That's life right now.
Actually, that's part of the beauty of the moment. Like I was in a meeting last night and my kid comes in to kiss me good night. And I don't usually in meetings get my kids to come in and kiss me good night. I'm usually like away from the house. So what do we need to know about poetry during a pandemic?
Oh boy. I think the first thing that I would tell anybody listening, especially if you lend yourself to any sort of creative endeavor, is to give yourself grace. If you are not creating, if you are not writing, if you are not anything, that is perfectly okay. It is a weird world. We are all in the middle of, I don't even know what at this point. Who knows where we are? And if you don't have it in you, if you're just too exhausted to write or paint or grocery shop or cook, if you're eating peanut butter sandwiches every day because that is all you can muster, like, that's okay. There's not a measure for what we are supposed to be doing in this. That said, I find poetry for me is very cathartic, and it is helpful for me to deal with big feelings and little feelings and just the everyday sometimes. It
feels like the poem you shared with us was like an act of paying attention well to small things. Yes.
It's okay to find comfort in the little things, whether it's, you know, go outside and get your fingers dirty and pull some weeds, or if comfort is propping your feet up and binge watching The Office for a weekend, whatever makes you feel better. You know, this is unprecedented. Everybody knows, like, there's all these like catchphrases, unprecedented times, and we're in this together, and they're tropes to make us feel better, but it's true. These are weird times, and we're all kind of stuck in the same Groundhog's Day kind of right now. And utilizing poetry for me has been, whenever I've had the inspiration to write, has been helpful.
Yeah. Hey, friends, you can post some comments or some questions here in Zoom to Isabella, and Jeremy Cracky, our producer, will be paying attention to those, and he's going to bring them to Isabella in just a minute. So he's paying attention to those on Facebook or here in Zoom. We'd love to get your questions to her. Isabella, do you have another poem for us?
I do. Well, I do.
I sort of had this fantasy in my mind that we'd be talking and then you would just sort of start like a musical, like, but you know, where they just start singing, like I'd ask you a question and just poetry would.
I would be lying if I didn't pretend my life was a musical 6 days out of 7.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm going to read, I've got a short one that I could follow by a slightly longer one.
Okay.
Both of these, again, I wrote fairly early on in lockdown. The first one I just called C19 because at that point we really didn't know what we were calling this thing, whether it was COVID or coronavirus or whatever. But this was inspired. This was before I'd actually stopped working. I was furloughed for a couple months, and nobody knew what was going on. And so the news was everywhere, and it was all you could do to constantly keep up with it. So this is how I felt in that moment. C19. My brain is a browser tab. I can't stop refreshing. Every moment, a breaking news pop-up window. When there isn't one, I worry even more. My hands are chapped but clean, everything clean. I see worry lines and fear deepening on faces I am not sure if I should acknowledge anymore.
Man, you could just feel the angst in that. I love that.
You know,
wow.
You said you wrote that early, but my brain is a browser tab with what was that other line in there about the
constantly refreshing?
My brain is a browser tab. I can't stop refreshing.
Yeah, that's I know I struggle a bit with anxiety, and that's kind of what it's like. Like it's like I haven't thought of it in that metaphor before, but it's like a broken record or a browser tab that just keeps refreshing.
Yeah.
So some pop-up news coming, and you're like, oh my gosh, and that's the most important thing, and then the next one.
This is the most important, and this is the most important. The thing at the end of the poem, you know, this was right at the time when people were just starting to wear masks, and we weren't really sure if we were supposed to, and maybe we should, and maybe we shouldn't. But I realized very early on, I actually had a doctor's appointment in Ann Arbor, and I'm in Howell, so it's about a 45-minute drive. And I stopped at a Kroger in Ann Arbor and realized that with people wearing masks, I couldn't see, you can't see anything but their eyes. And it's much harder to tell if people are smiling. And I didn't like that feeling, and I didn't know if you don't know if you should look at people when you can't tell what their expression is. It felt wrong. And I cried for the entire 45-minute drive home. It was probably the most stressful thing. I didn't know how to handle it at that point. And I actually had intended on that poem being longer, and I never finished it. And then I realized that I liked that it was unfinished because everything about it was anxious and unfinished.
Yeah. All right, so you said you had a little longer one for us.
I do, and this one.
And I'll remind friends you can put some questions or comments, and we'll bring them to Isabel in just a minute.
And again, this is another quarantine one that I wrote fairly early on. I read this, I think, with the poetry room. I don't remember. I read it a couple times in March and April events. This one, I was lucky enough, just to preface this, there is a wonderful publishing company that I have been featured by a few times called Capsule Stories. They did an ebook called the Isolation Edition. I think it was a paper copy, and I just probably can't find mine is the issue here. But so they did an entire anthology of poetry and prose and thoughts that people have written just in quarantine. So this poem is called "But Outbreak Was Just a Movie, and Now I Wake Up with a Different Kind of Headache." His ribs were broken, you said. The guy had hit him on purpose, stole the toilet paper. It wasn't even his. He had been carrying it for an old woman. These are not the things we discuss in civilized conversation. There is nothing civilized right now, but what else is there to do under self-quarantine, under 6-foot radius, social distancing, close the borders, there's talk of a curfew. We are only left with news and rumors that spread like a virus. I heard the psst of the air freshener in the corporate office bathroom. I knew what it was, but I wondered, slipping the lock, how long until they sprayed disinfectant instead of lavender, citrus, mountain breeze.
Rewind.
I wondered, slipping the lock, how long until they sprayed disinfectant instead of lavender, citrus, mountain breeze. How long until we break under the weight of restrictions? My friends that serve food and serve drink served pink slips, served late notices, collection letters for bills they couldn't pay when they couldn't go to work, leave the house, served the trays, couldn't buy the medicine they couldn't leave the house for, couldn't live without. They say it's not about if you get it, it's when. 1 week ago, we all sat in a theater filled to capacity, sharing pain and stories. And when the house lights came up, we said goodnight and goodbye. But now I don't know when to say hello again, or if. They said a few days, 10 days, 14, maybe 8 weeks. Now July, now August. They don't know any more than we don't know. And the not knowing might get me before COVID-19 ever could. It's mid-March, and this week feels like we have been in isolation for months. I have to force myself to stop checking the news. Changes too fast to process before another closure, another 500 cases, 100 more deaths. But if I don't check, I don't know. And I have to know something, have to be able to name the thing I can't control. At work, I stack business cards into houses and knock them down myself. Some semblance of control when the world around mutates into unchecked and untreatable chaos.
Oh man, well done. Love that.
We that line in there about how news and rumors spread like a virus, that's such an ironic line, and in relation to how we all felt. Everything. Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really multi-layered there, and I think that's what poetry like somehow says multiple things all at the same time. We
like to be.
You don't just say messy. One thing.
No. Poets are probably, I mean, I do love poetry and I write a lot this way where it's very straightforward. But occasionally you write something that meant one thing to you and somebody reads it and they get something completely different. And I love that. It's fantastic.
Yeah. Well, hey, Jeremy, you've been paying attention to the comments and the questions, or maybe you've got something you want to ask Isabella yourself.
Yeah, thank you, Isabella, for being here again. Love your artwork. It's so inspiring. I really have a question for Isabella first, but then a subsequent one for you, Tom, that came in the Zoom chat.
Okay.
But Isabella, is there an emotion that you attach your writing to that you find is easiest to express? And then
anxiety.
And then conversely, what would be the most difficult to write?
I don't write nature poetry. And I don't personally
Except
find
you
that
just shared with us a poem about a tulip.
Well, I know.
Is that not nature poetry?
Yes. I don't typically write nature poetry.
Okay. That was unusual.
Yes, there are many poets out there who write about snowy woods or the sea. And when I write about the sea or the ocean, I write about how it breaks you, how it erodes things. And erosion is absolutely a metaphor. I've got a poem about erosion. It's a haiku, and it is not at all about the ocean or erosion. It's about just feeling completely destroyed and broken down. So if I write anything with a nature theme, it is probably not really about nature.
It would be like you said, maybe your strongest emotion to write about is anxiety, and you can see the metaphor with churning seas or unrelenting erosion or just breakers crashing into something. That
Yes.
that kind of speaks loudly to anxiety. I love that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
But nature is definitely, if I'm writing strictly about nature, it's not my thing. I mean, I love trees, but if I try to sit down and write about trees or why I love them, it feels forced. I can write about love in a sense of longing or lust, but I don't write lovey poems. Not my thing. I'd rather break your heart.
You shared with us a couple of lust poems in our series on the 7 deadly sins when I was preaching on lust. Except that was the week that our technology fell all apart, and then it got better. So
it got better.
Jeremy, you said there was a question for me.
Yeah, well, for both of you. So in the chat here on Zoom, it says, "Hi. Other than Psalms, Proverbs, and Songs of Songs, are there more books in the Bible considered to be poetry?" And that's a question maybe I'd loft to both of you, because in a sense, in the New Testament, you read a lot of parables, and in a way, that's poetry. But Tom, go ahead and speak to that, and then certainly, Isabella, if you want to.
I'm going to just let Tom tackle that one. That is not my area.
All right, Tom, let's hear it.
Well, yeah, the person asking that hit on the big ones, but I'll just tell one story. I mean, I think the beginning of Genesis is a poem, and sometimes we try to make it into science, and it's a poem, not a scientific textbook. But the one that really strikes me that is not something that we're all familiar with is the 3rd chapter of Jonah is a poem, and I know that because when you start studying Hebrew in seminary, the first book that you translate is the book of Jonah, and because it's short. So chapter 1 and chapter 2 go fine. I mean, so think of it. It's the Hebrew, so it reads from right to left. It's a different script, and all of a sudden you get to chapter 3. And everything that you knew about Hebrew in your first year, like learning this, totally falls apart, completely and utterly. It's like you're looking at a foreign language, which you are, but it's a foreign language inside of a foreign language. And when you finally slog through chapter 3 and translating it and get to chapter 4. You were like, thank you, Lord Jesus, for prose, because poetry translating in another language, another script, is some hard expletives. One other one, though, that I think of is actually the very earliest, the oldest section or moment in the Bible is probably the Song of Deborah in Deuteronomy. I want to say 2 or 3. Or something no, it's Judges 2 or 3. And I had to translate that too, but I was much further along in Hebrew by that point, so it wasn't as hard. And I had a lot of fun translating it, and trying to get into English the stuff that's happening, the wordplay in Hebrew, trying to make that happen in English. It's a whole creative thing to try to translate poetry from one. I mean, it's like poetry to translate poetry, and how far you take license to accomplish the same feeling or things but they're not necessarily there literally. So there's quite a bit. In fact, the oldest, like I said, the Song of Deborah is probably the oldest piece of the Bible, and scholars think that because it's a song, so it would have been easily memorable. And they probably sang it for a long time before it was ever written down. I don't know. Biblical poetry is probably not your forte, Isabella, but was there anything that jumped out at you?
Nothing directly jumps out at me. My husband and I have been married for 15 years now, and so I don't really remember which readings we had at our wedding, but I know that one of them was from Song of Solomon, and the other was from Revelations.
Yeah.
I picked a verse from Revelations. I wish I could remember which one, but I attached so quickly to it when I read it. Like,
yeah,
that's totally what I want read. I remember my mom was like, Revelations, really?
yeah.
Yep.
Actually, you know what? As a preacher, I love it when people pick weird verses, because I get tired of preaching about 1 Corinthians 13, the love is patient.
I mean, it's lovely.
Love is not envious. I mean, it's beautiful, but give me something else to work on. I mean, I can just take the sermon I preached at the last wedding and preach on 1 Corinthians 13. So
like the copy and paste wedding.
Yeah. Give me the mark of the beast to figure out how to work that into like a wedding sermon.
Yes. Fire and brimstone, and for better or for worse.
Yeah. All right. Well, hey, we have come to, I guess, our last and final segment that we call Co-Video Conversations. And this is where we let Jeremy out of his cage. And I don't know that it's very poetic, Isabella. And I have no idea whatever he's going to bring. But he shows us a video, and then we have a conversation about it, or we try to. All right. So What do you got, Jeremy?
Okay, so it's interesting that all three of us, we're often on stage in front of people, whether performing, more or less Isabella and I performing in front of people, or Tom and I leading people in a worship service on any given weekend. I think all three of us would agree that maybe one of our biggest fears, would be this. Roll the video.
You're going to do a spoken word for us now, right?
Right.
And tell us what we're about to hear.
This is a viral video.
It's a freestyle.
Okay.
I'm just going to think it up.
Freestyle. Well, let me sit back. Go ahead, Marshall.
Okay.
Oh, boy.
Years ago, they tried to put me in the...
Look at Isabella.
This is live.
Did he say this is live?
Yes.
Absolutely froze.
Did you want to try to read something from your book?
Yeah.
Okay.
Oh, no.
Thank you, Lord.
Isabella, have you ever been frozen on stage? Tell us about it.
All right. So, I mean, it was forever ago. This was middle school choir. So, I had a handful of solos over my 3 years in my middle school choir. But there was one at our Christmas concert in 7th grade. I got mono before the concert, and I missed like a month of school, including all the rehearsals, including all the practice. And the Christmas song that I had a solo in was not a normal Christmas song. It wasn't like Silent Night or First Noel or anything. Like, I've never heard it since. And I got up on stage and I had my mic in my hand and I started singing and I completely forgot the words. And I just said right into the microphone, oh, shoot. There's easily 200 people in the audience. I died. And the funny thing about it is, like, I'm like, I don't know, 2016, I hated spoken word. I hated performing. It was not my thing. I was nervous. I didn't enjoy it. I actually have a video somewhere on my Facebook page that says, this is terrible. I'm never performing again. And now I'm here.
You're amazing.
And I do this, and this is what I do now. So I guess sometimes you just find a way to get over it.
It's not necessarily, am I going to forget the lyrics? Rather, it's not necessarily like, like if we're dreaming and the anxiety gets into our dreams, often people on stage are like, am I naked in front of an audience or something? No, for me, it's missing the lyrics. You know what I mean? And seldom does that happen, but that's always in the back of my mind. Tom, have you ever had an experience like that?
Yeah, there was a time I was preaching and I said something like, I'd written in my notes the Lord's Prayer, but I hadn't written it out. And I just knew that, like, I wanted to say something about it. And I said, it's like the Lord's Prayer says, And I totally froze. Like I could
It was
not
like that guy in the video.
remember the Lord's Prayer, like how it started. And afterwards I thought the Catholics have something on us because they call it the Our Father, which gets you going, because that's
I
what it
guess
starts
so.
with, Our Father who art in heaven. And so if I had said it's like the Our Father says, Our Father who art, and then, boom, you're into it. But I totally froze up. And after about like the longest 3 or 4 seconds in my life, the entire congregation shouted at me, Our Father.
No.
Isabella, Tom and I had been to the Poetry Room events, a few of them together. And I think Tom has maybe attended some without me, but whenever a poet takes the risk of getting on stage and expressing their art form, and I've loved watching how the community that's there is very supportive. They're like, you got it. You'll hear like comments from the back of the room saying, give it a shot, start over. You got this. We're here for you. I think that's really special.
Yeah.
It's one of my favorite things about the Poetry Room as a whole is the community of it. You get there and maybe you're nervous, and then you're not nervous anymore because they immediately like open arms. They are family immediately. And you can tell the people who who are nervous and are shaking and they say, yeah, this is my first time here. Now, though, like with that guy, that other gentleman, you will never see me try to recite from memory. Ever. Never. But I have seen so many poets get up on that stage at the Robin Theater and stop dead, and they freeze, and they stumble, and immediately there is a handful of people in the crowd who are yelling, you got this, go poet, we love you, we're here, start over, it's fine, just start over. Like, yeah, there's no reason to be nervous. It's my favorite.
Yeah. Well, hey, Isabella, I have experienced that at the Poetry Room, oftentimes there's a lot more church there than in most churches. So I would encourage people to check that out. How can people stay in touch with you if they want to read more of your poems or want to get involved in the Poetry Room?
You can find my work on Facebook or Instagram at Isabella J. Mansfield. The Poetry Room, I can't remember directly their URL, but it is the 517 Poetry Room, I think. They are usually out of the Robin Theater in REO Town, and they are wonderful. Masaki is phenomenal and is one of the most supportive people I've ever met. And so appreciative of everything. I mean, I wouldn't have been able to connect with you guys without Masaki first. So
yeah. Masaki.
That's where I am.
Several of our service. He often does his stuff from memory too. And like when he's been to our service, like right up before he gets on stage, he's like rehearsing it, and he's never stumbled. Actually, like none of us really know, as long as he just keeps going, whether it's what he wanted to say or like what he's saying, like he just keeps going.
One of the first open mics I went to back in Arizona, I was, again, super nervous. This was probably 2014 or so. And I had not done an open mic since high school and was nervous then. And this woman came up to me and she said, you shouldn't be nervous. There's not a single person out in that audience who has any idea what you're about to say. So if you mess up, we don't know any better.
Yeah.
Just keep going and don't call attention to it. And I've never forgotten that. But I also will not trust myself to memorize.
Yeah.
Nope.
Yeah, I've told Jeremy, if you're going to miss the lyrics, miss them like strong. Don't go weak on it.
Just go big or go home.
Just go, just belt out the wrong words. It doesn't matter if they're wrong on the screen. Just you own it. Hey, how can folks be in prayer for you?
Well, the first thing that comes to mind, my father passed away on the 4th. And so I am kind of still new in that grief a little bit. So I guess just peace. Yeah. Praying for peace would always be nice.
All right. Well, friends, let's take a moment and pray for Isabella and all those who have lost someone and are in grief right now or grieving. Good and gracious God, we give you thanks for the gifts of Isabella and her willingness to share them with us today. And we pray for this moment or space of grief and the loss of a loved one, a dearly loved one, and for all of those who grieve and in the midst of this haven't been able to grieve in the same way with hugs and touches and all of those normal expressions of comfort from family, friends, church, loved ones. We pray, Lord, in the midst of our inability to hold one another, that you would hold Isabella and those who grieve close, and they would know your peace and your comfort. We ask all these things in the name of Jesus and the power of your Spirit, and all who agreed said, Amen. Amen.
Thank you.
Hey, friends, would you join me in giving Isabella some love in the comments section and thanking God for her? There are a couple things that I want you to be aware of that are coming up. Today was our last episode of Our Daily Shelter. We're going to take a couple months off during the summer and probably come back with something else in the fall, but something different than Our Daily Shelter. You can always watch past episodes on our Facebook page or on our YouTube channel. And while you're on those places, we'd love for you to like us and subscribe to us. Race and racism is on all of our minds right now. And this Thursday, tomorrow, I continue a conversation about race with 3 other diverse pastors. We call it Perspectives. 1 Black pastor, 1 Puerto Rican pastor, and 2 white pastors. We're talking about what's happening right now. I think we're going to explore kind of how we're all processing this idea of defunding the police tomorrow night. We've been meeting since 2017 privately to talk about race and racism, and we've decided to just bring those conversations public. So join us Thursday night at 8 p.m. on the Congregations Organizing for Racial Reconciliation in Lansing Facebook page, or facebook.com/groups/core Lansing, COOR Lansing. This Sunday, I continue in the 3rd week of a 4-week online small group discussion on human sexuality and the LGBTQ community. It's subtitled, or the book is called Holy Love, A Biblical Theology for Human Sexuality. And we're looking at biblical foundation for affirming LGBTQ folks as fully human. And so, of course, with the Supreme Court having that kind of surprising, at least surprising for me, coming out of a Supreme Court ruling to disallow discrimination in employment this past week. Maybe you want to dive in. We're on chapter 3, so read up to chapter 3 and join us at 7 to 8:30 this Sunday in our all chat Zoom room. So we look forward to seeing you there. Right now, I think that we all need to connect with something bigger than ourselves. And while we won't be doing Our Daily Shelter anymore, we'd love for you to connect with God and others at Sycamore Creek. Do that through our connection card, our sycamorecreekchurch.org/connect. That's how you'll be in the know for everything that's going on. So don't shelter alone. Connect with others and God at Sycamore Creek. Friends, you've been watching Our Daily Shelter, a daily-ish live interactive video podcast and ministry of Sycamore Creek Church in Lansing, Michigan. In this time of sheltering in place, we think it's important to connect with the community. So find community every Sunday at 1 p.m. in a live interactive worship event at sycamorecreekchurch.org/SL-worship. That stands for South Lansing Worship. Or every Monday night in a church-wide video chat open to everyone at sycamorecreekchurch.org/all-chat. You can connect with us and we can connect with you through our digital connection card found at sycamorecreekchurch.org/connect. Submit prayer requests here on this topic or really any topic, or by email at prayers@sycamorecreekchurch.org. We've got a team of people who are praying for you daily. Download and check out our app by searching for SCCMI in your app store, and you'll find lots of great resources there, including past and current sermons. You can also join the mission of Sycamore Creek by giving financially through the app or at our website, sycamorecreekchurch.org. Your generosity helps make resources like Our Daily Shelter available for free. Take a moment and like and follow us on Facebook and share this video with your friends so they can find daily shelter in God's grace too. You may be sheltering in place, but we're here to help you shelter in God's grace. Make your home a shelter of the Most High.